The platinum band of my Tiffany bracelet, the same one Julian Croft had presented to me on my 10th anniversary at Ethelgard Innovations, felt heavier than shackles at 9:03 a.m. Inside the clasp, a barely noticeable inscription read, "Kelly, you are the soul of this company. Thank you for a decade." I remembered the day the blue box presented before the entire team, the swell of pride that made me feel indispensable, vital. Now, another 10 years later, that cold band was dragging me down into the sterile, airless space of the 34th floor conference room in a downtown Los Angeles skyscraper. Julian sat across from me at a huge Italian marble table, his perfectly tanned face a mask of rehearsed sympathy. His cashmere sweater, casually draped over his shoulders, cost more than my first car. His pearly white smile, which I once considered a beacon of friendship and unwavering trust, now seemed predatory, a glint of something reptilian in his eyes. "Kelly," he began, his voice as soft and soothing as a meditation podcast host's, designed to calm, to disarm. "We're looking to the future. You know, business is constant motion. Adaptation, innovation, synergy. That's what we've always done here at Ethelgard. We can't afford to stand still." I remained silent, a creeping chill spreading through my veins, a premonition of the axe falling. I knew this speech by heart. I had seen it play out with others, these loyal soldiers, as Julian liked to call them at corporate parties, before quietly escorting them to the exit with a golden parachute that barely qualified as silver, a polite severance that disguised a ruthless purge. But I was different. I wasn't just a soldier. I was an architect. I had helped design this very fortress of glass and steel, this corporate Olympus. 20 years. I came here as a young, ambitious UCLA graduate when Ethelgard was just a fledgling startup with a cramped office above a dusty coffee shop in Venice Beach, fueled by ambition and cheap espresso. My entire conscious life was inextricably invested in this place, in his dream that had imperceptibly, insidiously become my own. I remembered working until 2 in the morning, fueled by cold pizza, perfecting slides for our first monumental presentation that would either make or break us. I remembered missing my son's first steps because we were launching a new product and Julian, with his hypnotic charm, assured me that this launch would go down in history, etching our names into the annals of tech. I even canceled my anniversary trip with my husband to Napa Valley, a dream vacation, because Julian called, his voice dripping with faux helplessness. "Kelly, I can't do these high-stakes negotiations without you. You're my anchor. For the Ethelgard family," he would often say, his smile a warm, inviting trap, and I, the fool, believed him. I thought my relentless dedication, my unwavering loyalty, was my impenetrable shield, my ultimate protection, my immunity from the corporate culling. "Your role, Kelly, it's become redundant," he said, finally averting his gaze, not out of discomfort but boredom, to the flawless California horizon, where the distant Hollywood hills shimmered in the morning haze. "We're restructuring the department. Streamlining. We need fresh blood, a new perspective. Automation, new processes. You understand." I didn't understand. Not in the way he meant. All I understood was that Jaden, a 26-year-old Stanford graduate, the entitled son of one of our main investors, whom I had personally trained for the last 6 months, meticulously showing him the ropes, had just been handed a newly created position specifically designed for him, a position that, by some miraculous coincidence, absorbed every single one of my responsibilities. I remembered a week ago Jaden's arrogant smirk as he casually asked why we were still using that archaic reporting system, the very one I had developed 10 years ago, the bedrock of our data stability, the unsung hero of our efficiency. I had patiently, methodically explained the intricate reasons, the hidden layers of resilience, and he had merely nodded with a skeptical, dismissive smile, as if humoring a senile ant. Now I understood that it wasn't just idle curiosity, it was reconnaissance. All I understood was that all my accumulated knowledge, my 2 decades of invaluable experience, my finely tuned intuition about the market, the subtle nuances that no algorithm or automation could ever replicate, were suddenly valued at precisely 0. My age, my 45 years, had, in Julian's ruthless calculus, transformed from a hard-earned advantage into an unbearable burden. 20 years, Julian. My voice was a hoarse whisper, barely audible, the raw sound of betrayal. He finally looked at me, his gaze sharp, impatient. For a fleeting moment, the mask of rehearsed sympathy cracked, and I saw what truly hid underneath. A flash of irritation, a flicker of cold impatience. I was a problem to be solved, an inconvenient obstacle to be cleared before his lunch reservation. And we are incredibly grateful for them, Kelly, he said, his voice instantly becoming smooth as silk again, a polished veneer over a steel core. The severance package reflects that. Very generous, I would say. We take care of our own. There it was. The knife in the back, meticulously wrapped in a gleaming package of corporate jargon, delivered with a smile. I was no longer the soul of the company, the indispensable architect of its growth. I was merely one of our own, to be taken care of on the way out, a disposable cog in a ruthless machine. I pushed myself up from the opulent chair, my legs feeling like cotton, my body disconnected from my mind. I didn't shake his hand. I didn't utter another word. I just turned and walked away, every step a deliberate act of defiance. When the conference room door clicked shut behind me, I could physically feel the oppressive weight of unseen stares. The entire office, a vast open-plan space where I had spent more conscious hours than in my own home, boring into my back. I saw my assistant, Maria, her eyes wide with shock and sympathy, quickly avert her gaze. I saw some of my former colleagues, men and women with whom I had navigated countless crises, celebrated triumphs, and shared intimate confidences, suddenly become intensely, suspiciously busy with their screens, a flurry of feigned activity. Their stares weren't just pity. They were a chilling mixture of fear, relief that it wasn't them, and a silent, complicit farewell. I moved through my office, a space that had once been a second home, now a tomb gathering my meager belongings. A framed photo of my husband David and our son Alex on his college graduation day. A worn ceramic mug that proudly proclaimed Genius Fuel. A gift from my old team, a perfectly cared for orchid, its petals vibrant against the gray. I placed it all piece by piece into a drab cardboard box, a tangible symbol of my dismantled life. Then I drove home for the first time in 20 years, caught in the relentless soul-crushing daytime traffic on the 405 freeway, the symbol of LA's endless unfeeling sprawl. The California sun beat down mercilessly on the windshield, a mockery of warmth, but all I felt was an insidious bone-deep cold. The next few weeks were a relentless, suffocating fog. Not the romantic mist that sometimes envelopes the coast of Santa Monica, softening the edges of the world, but a thick, impenetrable smog that had descended upon my mind, choking off all light and clarity. David, my rock, tried desperately to support me, his eyes full of boundless love and raw anxiety, his voice a constant, gentle murmur. Kelly, honey, it's not the end of the world. You're the most talented person I know. You'll find something better. Something real. But his words, however heartfelt, couldn't penetrate the dense fog. They were like rain tapping on the window of a long-abandoned house where no one lived, no one listened. My entire identity, forged over 2 decades, was inextricably linked with Ethelgard. Kelly Sullivan, Vice President of Innovation Strategy. Who was I without that title, that purpose, that all-consuming mission? Just Kelly, a middle-aged woman abruptly jobless, saddled with a daunting mortgage on a house in Pasadena, adrift in a sea of absolute worthlessness. The vibrant California sun, which I had always cherished as a symbol of hope and new beginnings, now seemed cruel and mocking, its relentless brightness a source of torment. I would instinctively close the curtains, hiding from its relentless glare, seeking refuge in the manufactured gloom. The world outside lost its colors, its vibrancy. I remember looking at our bright bougainvillea flowers, their petals a riot of fuchsia, and seeing only muted, desaturated gray spots, as if life itself had been drained from them. Food lost its taste, each bite a bland, joyless chore. David would cook my favorite meals, his famous paella, my mother's lasagna, but I couldn't bring myself to eat more than a few meager bites, the flavors dead on my tongue. I would sit for hours in the living room, a ghost in my own home, staring blankly out the window at our manicured rose bushes, their perfect blooms now meaningless, seeing nothing, feeling nothing. My mind was simultaneously empty and overflowing, a paradox of despair. I replayed that last conversation with Julian over and over, an agonizing loop, analyzing every word, every subtle glance, every inflection, searching for a hidden meaning, a missed warning. Then I would scroll back through the 20 years, meticulously dissecting my career, trying to pinpoint the exact moment I had become redundant, obsolete. Was it when I subtly disagreed with him about that risky, unproven project 5 years ago, voicing concerns he dismissed as lack of vision? Or when I politely but firmly refused to move to the London office, prioritizing my family over his global ambition? The self-blame was an endless, exhausting, and utterly debilitating cycle. Sleep, when it finally came, brought no relief. It was a torture chamber of anxious dreams, of me running down endless, suffocating corridors at Ethelgard, Julian's predatory laughter echoing, bouncing off the glass walls, mocking my futile escape. I became a spectral presence in my own home, a fading shadow. I heard David talking on the phone with Alex, who was away at college in Berkeley, his voice low and thick with palpable concern, tinged with desperation. "I don't know what to do with her. She's just gone. Lost." And he was right. I was gone. All that was left was an empty shell, filled with a bitter mixture of shame, cold anger, and a deep, all-consuming, suffocating depression that threatened to swallow me whole. One sun-drenched Saturday, a day that mocked my inner turmoil, I forced myself to go to Trader Joe's, a familiar mundane chore that now felt like an insurmountable mountain. The store was predictably packed, a riot of cheerful chatter and vibrant colors. Standing in an aisle surrounded by bright packages of organic products and seemingly blissful people in Hawaiian shirts, a sudden terrifying wave of claustrophobia washed over me. The upbeat, quirky music, which usually created a carefree, quirky atmosphere, became an intrusive, grating cacophony. I heard a woman nearby happily recounting her recent corporate promotion to her friend, her voice bubbling with unadulterated joy. The word promotion hit me like an electric shock, a brutal jolt to my shattered reality. My heart, already pounding with anxiety, began to hammer so violently against my ribs I genuinely thought it would burst out of my chest, a desperate bird trying to escape its cage. The air became thick and heavy, suffocating, a suffocating blanket. I couldn't breathe, my lungs burning, desperate for oxygen. The bright, unforgiving fluorescent lights, usually benign, became unbearable, a searing glare, and the carefree chatter around me transformed into a deafening, terrifying roar, a cacophony of judgment. It seemed to me that everyone was looking at me, their eyes burning holes, knowing that I was a failure, that I had been cast aside like worthless trash, obsolete, unwanted. I dropped my basket, sending almond milk and avocados scattering across the polished floor with a sickening crash, and bolted for the parking lot, gasping for air, trembling uncontrollably, convinced with every fiber of my being that I was dying. It was my first terrifying panic attack, a raw primal scream from my shattered psyche. I collapsed into my car, clutching the steering wheel with white-knuckle desperation, and sobbed not from sadness, but from an animalistic primal fear that gripped me to my core. That's when David, my steadfast rock, laid down an ultimatum. He found me in the parking lot, having tracked my phone's GPS signal, a desperate act of love. He slid into the passenger seat, pulled me into his arms, holding me tight, and said in a voice heavy with pain, yet resonating with an undeniable fierce determination, "You're going to see a doctor, Kelly. You're going to see a therapist. I'm not going to watch you fade away like this. I love you more than words can say, but I can't do this for you. You have to fight, my love." I agreed, not because I genuinely believed it would help, not because I had any hope left, but because I saw the raw, palpable fear in his eyes, and it was the only force strong enough to break through the impenetrable wall of my apathy. My therapist was Dr. Anya Sharma, a woman with incredibly kind eyes and a voice as calm and soothing as a gentle stream, whose office felt less like a sterile medical office and more like a cozy, sun-drenched living room, filled with warmth and empathy. In our very first session, I could barely utter a single coherent word. I just sat there, a broken mess, and cried, the tears a torrent of suppressed grief. In the second, the words began to trickle out, hesitant at first, then gaining a slow, painful momentum. I told her about the abrupt dismissal, the profound betrayal, the soul-crushing emptiness that had consumed me. She listened without interruption, her gaze unwavering, her presence a silent, comforting anchor. In the third session, she began to ask probing, insightful questions. "Tell me not about how it ended, Kelly, but about how it was. Tell me about the good times at Ethelgard. What truly made you proud?" And hesitantly at first I began to remember. About the groundbreaking projects I was genuinely proud of, the ones that reshaped industries. about the brilliant team I had meticulously built from the ground up, fostering their talents. And gradually, session by painstaking session, she helped me dissect the insidious, toxic dynamics of my prolonged relationship with Julian. It wasn't overt bullying, she explained. It was something far more insidious, a slow, methodical poison. She helped me see the insidious pattern. How he would praise me in private, calling me his secret weapon, his indispensable right hand, inflating my ego with carefully chosen words, only to then present my innovative ideas at high-stakes board meetings, saying we decided, or the team developed this, subtly erasing my pivotal role, claiming my intellectual property as his own. How he meticulously crafted a corporate culture where working 24/7 was not just the norm, but a religious dogma, and any attempt to set healthy boundaries was perceived as insufficient dedication, a personal affront. How he would casually, dismissively use phrases like, "You're too emotional, Kelly," or "You're taking things too personally," whenever I dared to point out critical risks, ethical lapses, or potential problems with his grand, flawed visions. It was classic gaslighting, a systematic erosion of my reality, my self-worth. Dr. Sharma, with her profound empathy, gave it a name, a medical diagnosis, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, CPTSD, the devastating result of prolonged psychological abuse and insidious manipulation within a professional environment. Julian hadn't merely fired me, he had spent years systematically undermining my self-esteem, meticulously stripping away my confidence, to make me utterly dependent on his approval, to ensure I would never even dream of succeeding elsewhere. And the most terrifying, soul-crushing part was that for a long time it had terrifyingly worked. Months blurred into a quiet, painful continuum. Thanks to the unwavering support of therapy and the steady hand of medication, the suffocating mental fog began to slowly, imperceptibly lift, revealing glimpses of the world again. I was still a ghost, a pale shadow of my former self, but now, for the first time, I could discern my own outline, my own fading contours. And with this new, fragile vision came something else. Not just the dull ache of anger. Not just the gnawing emptiness of sadness. It was a cold, pure, crystal-clear fury. A burning, righteous indignation. Fury at Julian for what he had ruthlessly done, and an even deeper, more searing fury at myself for allowing him to do it, for being such a blind, loyal fool. The turning point, sharp and undeniable, came one evening. I was aimlessly scrolling through the digital abyss of Forbes online, seeking mindless distraction, when my eyes snagged on an article, its headline a cruel parody of my despair. Julian Croft of Ethelgard, a visionary changing the future of technology. There on the screen was his perfectly composed picture, his predatory smile radiating false charisma, a gleaming award clutched in his hand. The article quoted him extensively on the tough but necessary restructuring that had made the company leaner and more agile, a direct, mocking reference to my dismissal. He pontificated about the very innovations I had developed, the groundbreaking strategies I had meticulously proposed, the entire architecture of his so-called empire. He had co-opted my entire professional life, my intellectual property, my very essence, and was now being celebrated for it, lauded as a genius. That's when the plan, sharp and precise as a scalpel, began to coalesce in my mind. It wasn't a sudden, blinding flash of insight, a moment of divine inspiration. It was a slow, methodical crystallization of an idea, rising relentlessly from the bitter ashes of my former self, a phoenix forged in cold, hard fury. Julian hadn't just taken my job. He had stolen my story. And I was going to take it back. But not in the way he or anyone else expected. I wasn't going to sue him for age or gender discrimination. That would be a long, drawn-out, excruciatingly expensive legal battle that would inevitably drag my name through the mud, publicly branding me as a victim, a role I utterly rejected. I wasn't going to write angry, cathartic posts on LinkedIn. That would be too simple, too fleeting, too much his style of shallow, performative outrage. My plan was different. It was quiet. It was a long game, played in the shadows, a silent, meticulous war. And it was aimed directly at the one thing Julian valued above all else, more than money, more than power, his colossal ego, his meticulously crafted public image as an unparalleled genius and a visionary. I knew all his weaknesses, every chink in his formidable armor, because I had spent 2 decades by his side, watching, learning, observing his every move with an intimacy that bordered on obsession. I knew about his insatiable narcissism, his pathological need to be the smartest, the most brilliant person in any room, his gnawing paranoia about competitors from Silicon Valley, a constant, low-grade hum of anxiety beneath his polished exterior. And I was going to use every single one of those vulnerabilities against him, meticulously, ruthlessly. I had been a ghost in his system for 20 years, an invisible force that made everything work seamlessly, flawlessly. Now I would become the ghost that would systematically, irrevocably, destroy everything he held dear. I started small, with meticulous preparation. I immersed myself in the labyrinthine world of cybersecurity, devouring courses and tutorials, learning to create anonymous profiles, master VPNs, and communicate through encrypted email. My depressive apathy, a dark cloud, transmuted into a manic, laser-like focus, a dangerous energy that propelled me forward. I carefully crafted my new identity, a formidable, unassailable pseudonym, Cassandra, a prophetess doomed to speak the truth but never to be believed. My first target was a young, ambitious tech journalist named Ben Carter, who wrote for an online publication known for its sharp, incisive investigations. I didn't send him a bombshell, a single explosive revelation that could be easily dismissed. No. I sent him breadcrumbs. Small, almost imperceptible inconsistencies in Ethelgard's meticulously polished quarterly reports. Asked them why Project Orion, which Julian Croft so loudly trumpeted as a resounding success in the last quarterly report, was actually 30% over budget and was quietly, conveniently shelved last week, I'd write. My fingers flying across the keyboard in the dead of night. Look into the unusually high turnover rate among female engineers in the crucial R&D department. Could it possibly be related to innovation bonuses being systematically, subtly redirected to top management, benefiting certain individuals? At first, Ben was understandably skeptical, cautious. But I provided him with irrefutable evidence, exact dates, precise document numbers, verifiable names, internal memos that spoke volumes. He, a true journalist, started to check. And to his growing astonishment, my data was confirmed, every breadcrumb a damning piece of truth. Ben Carter, intrigued by the tantalizing hints of corruption, began to dig deeper, his journalistic instincts fully engaged. The first few small, seemingly innocuous articles appeared online, quietly questioning the company's previously flawless, unassailable image. Nothing overtly serious, nothing that would immediately trigger a panic, but enough to plant insidious seeds of doubt in the minds of investors and the public. The next step was a subtle, psychological game, a delicate dance of manipulation. I knew, with an almost pathological certainty, that Julian was utterly obsessed with his main competitor, the Palo Alto-based tech firm, Apex Industries. I, still operating anonymously, meticulously crafted a seemingly plausible, yet subtly flawed, version of a crucial part of our old but still viable marketing strategy and leaked it directly to Apex. A strategy Julian had contemptuously dismissed years ago as too conservative, lacking vision. But I inserted a single, subtle yet critically fatal error into it, a flaw so cunningly hidden that only someone with a truly deep, intuitive understanding of the market's intricate nuances, someone like me, could possibly notice it. As I had meticulously calculated, Apex took the bait, implementing the strategy, and it led to a small but embarrassingly public failure, a minor stumble in their flawless public image. And then, with exquisite timing, I leaked the corrected, brilliant version of this very strategy to Julian himself, through a carefully constructed fake source, making it appear as if it were highly valuable. Exclusive insider information from a desperate competitor. I knew his gargantuan ego wouldn't let him resist such a tantalizing morsel. When he saw that Apex had stumbled and he seemingly held the key to their mistake, he immediately convinced himself he was an unparalleled genius who had single-handedly figured out their entire cunning plan. He immediately triumphantly implemented this brilliant strategy at Ethelgard, convinced he was making a masterful move. It brought him a quick, visible victory in the short term, a surge in stock value, and he trumpeted it at every conceivable opportunity, further inflating his already swollen ego, confirming his delusion of invincibility. He never suspected, not for a second, that he was merely a puppet dancing on my strings, playing by my meticulously crafted rules. I had subtly shown him that he could outplay his competitors, and he had swallowed the bait, hook, line, and sinker. His carefully cultivated paranoia had transmuted into dangerous overconfidence, a far more lethal flaw than any insecurity. While he was utterly consumed by his arrogant witch hunt within the company, tirelessly searching for phantom traitors, and publicly celebrating his string of fake victories, convinced he was a tactical genius, I was quietly, methodically preparing my masterstroke. It was a Trojan horse cunningly disguised. I knew with absolute certainty that Ethelgard's biggest project this year, the crown jewel of Julian's vision, was the monumental launch of their new flagship product Elysian, a luxury lifestyle app that was boldly touted to revolutionize the entire market, a digital Shangri-La. I had personally managed the early, crucial stages of this project, intimately familiar with its every intricate detail, its entire sprawling architecture. And crucially, I knew its fatal flaw. There was a critical, potentially devastating software security issue related to user data privacy. A seemingly minor one at first glance, easily overlooked by a less meticulous eye. It allowed, under certain obscure conditions, unauthorized access to a user's precise geolocation and highly sensitive personal data. I had reported this to Julian, not once but repeatedly, my memos meticulously detailing the risks. I had even proposed a comprehensive solution, a fix that would, however, require a 3-month delay in the highly anticipated launch, a delay Julian deemed unacceptable. He had brushed it aside with his usual dismissive wave of the hand. "We can't afford a delay, Kelly," he had snapped, his eyes flashing with irritation. "Apex is breathing down our necks. Just fix it with a patch after launch. No one will ever know. Trust me." But I had saved all the documents, every single one. All my detailed memos, every dismissive reply he'd sent via Slack and email, every archived conversation. I had saved them on a personal encrypted hard drive, a dark, hidden vault of truth, as a form of insurance, a silent, desperate safeguard, without even knowing for what dark day I might need them. Now I knew. I wasn't just going to leak the information to simply release the truth. That would be too crude, too direct, too easily contained. I wanted Julian to destroy himself. Publicly. Irrevocably. The biggest, most glittering event of the year for Ethelgard was the annual Innovators Gala, an opulent, self-congratulatory evening Julian had meticulously crafted to honor himself. It was a lavish, over-the-top affair held in a grand ballroom in Beverly Hills, to which the elite press, the most influential investors, and the entire tech elite of Silicon Valley were invited. And it was at this very event that the official launch of Elysian was to be announced, a crowning moment for Julian's carefully constructed empire. A week before the gala, precisely timed, I made my final, decisive move. I anonymously sent the full, damning package of documents about the Elysian vulnerability to 2 strategically chosen individuals. The first was Ben Carter, the ambitious tech journalist. I provided him with everything he needed to not only understand the depth of the problem but to frame it as a monumental corporate cover-up. The second was a board member, Howard Vance, the only person on Ethelgard's board I genuinely respected for his unwavering integrity, his unyielding ethical compass. I sent him the information with a subtle, chilling hint that it would soon become public knowledge, a ticking time bomb. I had planted the seeds of panic, not just in Julian's mind, but within the very foundation of his company. The night of the Innovators Gala arrived, a dazzling spectacle of wealth and power. I sat at home in my quiet living room in Pasadena, the only light the glow of my laptop screen, watching the live stream of the event unfold. David sat next to me, silently holding my hand, his presence a grounding force. He knew about my meticulously crafted plan, its daring and its ruthlessness. He had seen how this cold, calculated determination had, against all odds, brought me back from the brink of despair, breathing life into my shattered spirit, although a palpable fear for my well-being, for my very soul, lingered in his eyes. Julian took the stage, bathed in the blinding glare of spotlights, to a roar of thunderous applause. He was utterly in his element, a demigod on his carefully constructed Olympus. He shone, a radiant figure, talking eloquently about innovation, about the boundless future, about how Ethelgard was single-handedly changing the world with its revolutionary vision. He was the undisputed master of ceremonies, the charismatic leader, the architect of a new digital era. And then came the moment for the Elysian presentation, the grand unveiling of his masterpiece. He spoke with polished conviction about security, about user trust, about how their groundbreaking system meticulously protected what was most precious, the private lives and sensitive data of their loyal customers. And then, with a silent, surgical precision, my carefully orchestrated plan went into devastating action. Ben Carter, strategically positioned in the front row, his face impassive, raised his hand to ask a question. This had been prearranged with the organizers as part of an interactive Q&A session, a seemingly innocuous detail designed to ensure his access. "Mr. Croft," Ben began, his voice clear and resonant, cutting through the self-congratulatory hum, "Ben Carter, TechCrunch. An impressive presentation indeed. But I have a rather pressing question regarding Elysian's security. Can you comment on a core system vulnerability that, according to internal documents, could potentially give third parties unauthorized access to users' precise geolocation and highly personal data? And more critically, are you aware of internal reports that explicitly recommended delaying the launch to fix this very issue, reports that seem to have been dismissed? A chilling, absolute hush fell over the opulent ballroom. All the cameras, relentless and unblinking, swiveled, locking onto Julian, capturing his every nuanced reaction. I saw a fleeting flicker of pure, unadulterated panic in his eyes, a raw, naked fear, but it vanished instantly, replaced by his usual impenetrable mask of confident, dismissive charm. From the other side of the vast room, I could see Howard Vance, the board member, staring at Julian, his face a stone mask, his expression utterly unreadable, a silent, powerful judge. This was the moment of truth, the apex of my intricate plan. Julian had two options, two paths laid bare before him. He could acknowledge the problem, however painful, state that they were working diligently on a fix, and publicly take responsibility for the oversight. It would be a devastating blow to his meticulously crafted reputation, a public humiliation, but the company, with its vast resources and established brand, could, perhaps, survive such a crisis. But I knew him. His narcissistic ego, his pathological need for absolute perfection, his inability to ever admit fault in front of others would never, ever allow it. Admit a mistake? In front of all these people, the media, the investors, the tech elite? Impossible. Unthinkable. Thank you for your question, Ben, Julian said smoothly, his voice a silken thread, his smile widening, a terrifying rictus. But I'm afraid your information is entirely incorrect, perhaps even malicious misinformation. Elysian is unequivocally the most secure system on the market. We've conducted thousands of hours of rigorous testing, countless penetration tests. I can assure you, our loyal customers, our valued investors, and indeed the entire tech world, that no such vulnerabilities exist. This is, most likely, simply misinformation propagated by our competitors who are clearly afraid of our unparalleled success. He had lied. A blatant, unadulterated lie. To the entire country. In front of his entire board of directors. And the very second, the precise instant he finished his damning sentence, Ben Carter's phone, clutched in his hand, lit up. He had published his article, The Digital Fuse Ignited. The headline, stark and devastating, screamed across the internet. Ethelgard launches Elysian with known data vulnerability. CEO Julian Croft publicly denies documented facts. The article included scanned copies of my meticulously detailed memos. My repeated ignored warnings. His dismissive replies. On the huge, gleaming screen behind Julian, where the Ethelgard logo had been spinning in serene perfection, a real-time stock market news ticker abruptly replaced it. And I, along with every single person in that stunned, silent ballroom, watched in grim fascination as Ethelgard's stock, ATHG, began to plummet in after-hours trading, a red line, stark and unforgiving, stretching relentlessly downwards. -5%, -10%, -22%, a cascade of financial ruin. Julian's perfectly tanned face went ashen bone white. His predatory smile froze, a grotesque mask of horror. He stood alone on the grand stage, under the blinding spotlights, suddenly looking small, utterly lost, a pathetic, broken figure in his expensive suit. He had destroyed himself. His own colossal arrogance, his own self-serving lies, his own insatiable ego, had become the very weapon that had inexorably, fatally, killed him. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel joy. I felt only a quiet, profound, almost spiritual relief. As if a crushing, heavy stone that I had carried in my chest for 20 years, a burden of betrayal, and then for another long, agonizing year in my self-imposed prison of despair, had finally, utterly dissolved, leaving behind only an echoing void. I gently closed the laptop. David, my steadfast anchor, hugged me tight, his arms a comforting embrace. "Is it over, Kelly?" he asked softly, his voice thick with emotion, a hopeful tremor. "Yes," I replied, my voice hoarse but clear, a new lightness in my soul. "It's over. It's finally over." The next day, the news was everywhere, a wildfire of corporate scandal. Julian Croft was immediately, unceremoniously fired from the company he had built on other people's brilliance. The board, in a frantic attempt at damage control, launched an internal investigation that would undoubtedly uncover years of malfeasance. Class action lawsuits, massive and crippling, were already being filed against the crumbling company. The empire he had meticulously built on lies, on deception, and on the backs of other people's bones, was now irrevocably crumbling into dust. And me? I woke up in the morning, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I saw the sunlight streaming, unfiltered, through the blinds, painting golden stripes across my bedroom floor. I could smell the rich, comforting aroma of coffee David was brewing, a scent of normalcy I hadn't noticed in years. The world, my world, had colors and smells again, a vibrant tapestry returned to life. I went out to the backyard, to our neglected garden, a place that had mirrored my soul's desolation, where the weeds had long since aggressively overtaken the once vibrant flowers. I knelt down, feeling the cool earth beneath my fingers, and began to pull them out one by one, each weed a tangible symbol of a past burden. It was hard work, physically demanding, but it was good work, cleansing, liberating. A week later I had my last cathartic session with Dr. Sharma. I told her everything, the full, unvarnished truth, the intricate details of my calculated revenge. She listened, as always, without judgment, her kind eyes reflecting understanding. "Revenge didn't heal you, Kelly," she said softly, her voice gentle, but firm with truth. "You healed yourself when you decided to fight back. When you took control of your own story, your own narrative. The plan was just a tool, a catalyst for your own resurgence." And she was right. Revenge didn't heal me. Therapy, David's unwavering, unconditional love, and the relentless, restorative march of time, that's what truly healed me, stitching together the fragmented pieces of my soul. But revenge, it gave me back my story. It allowed me to finally, irrevocably, close this agonizing chapter on my own terms with my head held high. I was no longer the ghost that was haunted by a toxic past. I was just Kelly. A woman, whole and self-possessed, in her garden in California, pulling weeds to make room for something new, something beautiful, something profoundly real to grow. And that in the quiet, sun-drenched silence was more than enough.